Hey Rebels, before we get started, let me just say, welcome to the last episode of 2020. It's episode 141, and that's kind of a big deal unto itself. I was reading most podcasts don't make it to episode 30. It's just too much time and too much work, and people burn out and they run out of things to say. It's humbling to me to have a dedicated audience of listeners who, for their own reasons, are tuning in each week to hear us talk about beer and interviews with all sorts of people. It's kind of funny. I've had a few people recognize me at the tap room strictly by my voice, or when they hear my laugh, they'll say, "Hey, I recognize your voice. You're the guy from the pod." And that's kind of surreal. I don't really know how to act. I just say thank you. I'm going to be taking some time off in the next couple weeks, so there's going to be a 2 to 3 week break after this episode before I start launching in 2021. So if you don't see an episode for a couple weeks, no worries. We're not killing the show. The next episode is going to be a roundup of all the 2020 beers. We're going to talk about styles and trends, what worked, what didn't, who's experimenting, and who really knocked it out of the park. And we're going to make some predictions and bets for beer in 2021. So without further ado, let's kick off the last episode of 2020. Hey Rebels, my name is Matthew Barton. I'm the host of the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. A few weeks ago, I put out a call to my friends and coworkers asking who's doing cool stuff in Saskatoon, and one of the names that popped into my email was Lenore Maier. She's a musician with the Garrys and deeply involved with the Saskatchewan music scene. And most importantly, to our little beer podcast, she has a history with homebrew. So let's get into it. Lenore, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
How's it going?
Great. I'm on holidays, although I feel like I've kind of been on a big holiday lately, but I'm on extra holiday right now, and I'm having a beer much earlier in the day than I normally do, so things are off to a great start.
But it's not the morning, it's in the afternoon, so you're all good.
Yeah. For me, it's a bit early, but I'm just going to roll with it and see where the night takes me now.
Well, what are you drinking?
I'm actually having a Rebellion Michelada, which is great. I think Micheladas have become a little bit of a buzzword beer in the past maybe 4 or 5 years. And they're definitely not all created equally, especially if you've ever had an actual Michelada, like a Mexican Michelada. So I'm always a bit hesitant with them, but I quite enjoy this, and I think you've done a really good job.
Oh, thank you. We found it tends to split the crowd.
Oh, yeah?
People who understand what a Michelada is, who've had it before, they get it. They're like, yes, this is good. But people who don't know what they're getting just viciously hate it.
Right, especially if you're in like beer and clam territory. So like here in Saskatchewan, so you've got to understand that they're different,
When it comes to beer, I know you did a little bit of home brewing.
Yeah.
So if you're into Michelada, have you had a chance to have a traditional Michelada?
I have. It was a few years before I actually started brewing myself at home. So when I was drinking them, I wasn't thinking like someone who loves beer. I was younger and just sort of like on vacation, But I spent a couple of months in Mexico in my early 20s and was introduced to Michelada all throughout areas, especially in the like Oaxaca region. I think you can find them in various places, but I drank them a lot there. And then I saw them kind of resurfacing in liquor stores maybe 10 years later. I said, oh, these are the things that are becoming popular here. That's cool. But like in a canned form, which I had never had a canned Michelada in Mexico, of course, It's more served as like a cocktail or like a mixed drink, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's cool.
I remember being a little kid and my mom would be drinking lots of beer and clam. She'd have the rim would be spiced. It was always something that was present, but I never really developed a taste for it. It was never for me.
Yeah, I'm not the hugest fan of clam either. Like I'll have it maybe if I'm really hungover, And for some reason, you don't ever need to drink alcohol, but for some reason, I feel like it might be a good idea, like if it's a summer day and it's a social thing or something. But yeah, it's usually more of a recovery drink for me. Maybe it's all the sodium or whatever, but yeah, I do prefer Michelada more. Anyway, the spice,
Maybe this is just my opinion, but I think Canada could use a lot more influence from Mexico in terms of our cuisine and beverages. I think Mexico has so much to offer in terms of not just spice and heat, but in other kind of textures and flavors that are just amazing.
Gastronomically. Yeah, I agree. It's been a while since I've been there, but I remember being in Mexico City when I was maybe 25 or something, and in the Plaza de Armas, which is like the town square of every major city. There's always a lot going on, and historically, architecturally, but gastronomically, there's always some amazing things you can get, like 3 tacos for like 50 cents or something. At least those were the prices then. Like relatively cheap, but so good. And just from people who like roll their carts up, and it's just some amazing food to be had just by street vendors. It's what makes me want to go back.
Things I miss the most are machaca and ceviche. I miss that.
Oh yeah, I don't know what machaca is, but I've definitely had ceviche many times.
Machaca is like a chopped salted pork, and it's just
cool.
You eat it with breakfast. I think it was maybe more Sinaloa thing.
Okay,
I'm not sure, but it was delicious. I could just eat it all day.
Yeah, I ate a lot of ceviche in Peru, and had ceviche mixto, which is like probably the most daring type of ceviche because you never know what's in there. So you get like octopus legs and all kinds of cool stuff, and it looks like octopus legs, So it's a bit more for an adventurous taste. If you like trying, strange different foods and stuff when you're vacationing or whatever. There's a place in Saskatoon here, which you might be familiar with, called Dylan and Cam's. They exist in the same building as Shelter Brewing, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They make some really wonderful and really authentic tasting Mexican fare. If you're ever in Saskatoon, you can definitely check it out. It's delicious.
Are they the ones serving at Shelter?
Yeah, that's right.
Then I've definitely had their tacos at Shelter.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was great food.
Yeah, they're awesome, and they're just really lovely, kind of down to earth unassuming guys, and they're really, really good at what they do.
We have Roberto with El Troposon here in Regina. Him and his wife are from Mexico, and they do amazing tacos and ceviche.
Cool.
I can't get enough. And Shelter is going to be like on my list. The one of the first things I do when I go back to Saskatoon after COVID is to go get some tacos and beer at Shelter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually with my coworkers once every few weeks. Usually we go to Shelter for some beers and tacos as like a fun staff thing. Of course, we haven't done that in a while, but that's definitely something I'm missing out of my regular routine because it's always like the atmosphere in there is also pretty fantastic. The beer is delicious. They're kind of just doing it all right for me, for everything I want in a craft beer experience. They kind of have a perfectly well-rounded version of everything I look for. So I'm really excited to be able to go back and hang out in there.
I really I enjoyed hanging out with them at the Saskatchewan Craft Beer Festival in Regina, and I was a little bit sad because I didn't get to travel up to Saskatoon because this year's got canceled. I like talking with Stuart. He's very unassuming, laid back. I think he might be the kind of guy who doesn't get ruffled.
Yeah, they seem, and his partner, I'm not sure what her name is, but they're Jill? I'm not sure. Anyway, just so friendly. And whenever I pop in there, they definitely treat me like I'm really welcome. And, they just make you feel like you belong in there or you should be in there. It's really nice. They don't treat you like a stranger. And which is fine if you do that in some places, but it feels really comfortable and familiar when people are like, oh, nice to see you, how are you, it goes a long way.
Especially in something like craft beer, which for some people may feel a little bit like gatekeeping.
Sure. Well, it can be pretty intimidating because it's a big, broad world, and as soon as you jump into it, if you're interested in beer or a beer geek or whatever, you just learn that there's just more and more and more to learn, and it's like a sea of information and really cool stuff and a lot of different things to talk about. And if you're sometimes people don't even realize that's the case, because there's a beer culture in Saskatchewan that is very much like, I know what I like. If it's clear and cold, that's all I want, So it's like, it's hard to imagine someone kind of changing over because it's like going from a one-page book to an encyclopedia or something.
Well, what are you observing with the Saskatoon scene? I haven't been up in months.
Well, there has been, I'd say, in the past, I don't know, maybe 7 years in Saskatoon, I guess a really big growth and introduction of new microbreweries in Saskatoon. I think that in terms of craft beer, Saskatchewan is a really good example of being a little bit behind from other provinces. But nonetheless, we're still moving forward. So it's been really exciting to be able to go to a liquor store and see like a ton of new choices that you can choose from that are made in the province, as opposed to one or none even before, right? So, and not only are there more and more microbreweries popping up, they are quality microbreweries. So really exciting beer to try. It's not just, you're not just drinking it because it's your friend's homebrew. We all know what that's like. You're drinking it because it's really good. And lots of the microbreweries here do a lot of community-minded things. Like 9 Mile is a really good example. The Garrys, the band that I play in, they invited us to brew a beer with them. That was in tandem with an album that we released in October, sorry. So they let us into their brewing home, and we got to pick like the ingredients, and they kind of let us have our way with things in there. And they were along with us along the whole way just to make sure that it would turn out well, because it's a science, right? And you need to know what you're doing to make good beer. So like they didn't have to do that, like we didn't approach them to do it. They just are really cool and thought that we might enjoy doing it. So that's a perfect example of like microbreweries doing awesome stuff where like they easily could have just avoided that, So they care about the community, and it shows, I think, because they're, especially during COVID, lots of the places that have tap rooms are faced with really difficult decisions. And like Rebellion's no exception, I'm sure, but it's one of the places where people are going to keep coming, and the demand is higher than ever. But you have to make sure everyone's going to be safe, right? So it's like a lot of pressure. So I find a lot of places are delivering and stepping up and becoming really good community leaders, and it's happening in the beer world, which is pretty cool.
Our taproom got steamrolled by COVID. I think we have a capacity of like maybe 3 tables at the moment. It's pretty rough. Like there's no real opportunity to sit and enjoy yourself like you used to.
Yeah.
But in the other way, people have been emailing us or calling us saying, how can I support you? What's the best way to get cash into your hands so I can enjoy your product? And so we leaned hard into takeaway, into pickup and delivery with whomever we could. Like Sass Beer Delivery was doing their thing. That's Pile of Bones. And then Co-op themselves in Saskatoon has said, we want to do delivery with you guys too. So we've been working with them to make that happen.
Yeah, I think the craft beer world is also one of the ones that have made some of the biggest pivots in terms of like business model and stuff. It's just like some places just shut down or else kind of continue doing sort of what you were doing before. But yeah, things have changed a lot with just in terms of like how you package or can or bottle stuff, like, it changes everything. And I don't work in that industry, but I can see that there's major changes that they've had to make because of it all.
Well, seeing as you collabed with 9 Mile, the Garrys, your band, you must have some connection to the community that made them sit up and take notice. How does that work?
I don't know. I guess maybe slowly but surely. I kind of think of it like that project, or any project that has any sort of like satisfying components to it, artistic ones. I think that it's like a sand castle or a big Lego castle or something, where you just like slowly, you slowly water it. If it's a plant or whatever, you just work on it slowly. So it's not like one day you're wake up and get this record deal. I don't think it's realistic to think like that anymore. Maybe it was before, but it's more just a project that you work on over a really long period of time. And I think it's the same with like a small business almost, just in terms of like, you can have a coffee shop open up down the street and they've been there for 2 years, but to you just discovered it, So I think that that's the same thing with music is, we've been working at that project for about 5 years, and it's awesome that even like now people are like, oh, who's this band? Oh, cool, whatever, right? So it's like slowly but surely more and more people or take notice of what you're doing, or like understand familiarity with the name. And I think that 9 Mile's invitation for us to do a collaboration is just like a proof of that. Whereas like 3 years ago, I don't think they would have done it because they probably didn't know who we were. But because we continued working and we keep working, I think that's probably the reason why.
What's the elevator pitch of the Garrys?
Well, we usually say it's like surf noir, or like landlocked surf or something like that. We usually take our bios or take our description from how other people describe us, instead of maybe trying to create our own. So people often will kind of tell, one of the reasons we're interesting is that we're making surf music in a place that's like couldn't be further from the ocean. And people seem to like that or think that's funny, so we use it. We usually try to, like, we are sisters, but that we usually don't like lead with that, because it's almost a coincidental thing. Because people often say, oh, you're sisters, you can harmonize so well, but it's like, well, no, we practice. That's how we harmonize well. It's not because we have the same mother or father. They don't have anything to do with each other. So, yes, sometimes it can lend itself to these like stereotypes and stuff, weird shticks and things. So, yeah.
I say this with all good intentions and all sorts of love, but I personally admit I don't have a deep musical knowledge. I think your music appeals to me personally because I'm such a dork. like I'm really into ska, which is dorky, and I just was listening to your stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, this is my kind of stuff.
Well, that's lovely to hear. Thanks for sharing. I think something that, like, we don't have any agenda in terms of like who we're trying to market ourselves to or anything like that. We just play music that like we would be doing the exact same we just do what we want to do, basically. And the fact that some people enjoy it is it's great, you know. If nobody enjoyed it, we would probably still be making the same music. But one thing that's really cool about it is, you know, little kids like it, and like old folks like it, seniors. People often say like, my kid won't stop listening to the Burger song, for example. You know, we played at Regina Folk Fest a couple of years ago. There's so many young kids there who were like lining up to see us, and their parents were like embarrassed, you know, because they were like, oh my god, my kid won't stop. But it's like the best, you know. So when young folks come to our shows, it's like the best, and like because we realize that we can, they're looking up to us in some regard, and so we try and remember that in the way we speak, you know, in the things, the message we send, that kind of stuff, because little folks are really porous and absorbent to how people act around them, especially people they're looking up to. So that's pretty cool.
I remember I was flipping through some of your tracks just on my laptop, playing some of the tunes, and my little guy, he's 4.5, and he was just like wiggling and dancing and getting into it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny why that is. I think maybe we listened to lots of like Raffi as kids or something, you know, but like me and Julie, she's the bassist. She and I played in a fake band when we were kids. Erica, our guitarist, she was a little too young at the time. She was like kind of a baby and just kind of crying all the time. But Julie and I would make these fake bands, and they were very much like that kind of, you know, like silly kid boppy type of stuff, because we were kids too, and maybe we brought a little bit of that with us into our adulthood or something, because, you know, we still have, when we're jamming, we still have that same kind of fun, you know. We're doing it for the same reasons we were doing it when we were like 6 and 8, you know. Yeah, so cool.
Listening to you talk about how it's resonating with kids, I kind of wanted to touch upon your work with Girls Rock. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so Girls Rock Saskatoon has been around for several years now. I'm starting to lose track of the years, actually. It was founded by Alison Whalen and Maren Lowen here in Saskatoon. And I think it was one of their very first sort of public kind of PSAs saying, hey, we're starting this thing. This is what it's all about. If you're interested, come and join us, because we're a team of 2 people right now. And of course, it takes like way more people than that to run a rock camp. And it was at a International Women's Day fundraiser that they came out and spoke, and me and my 2 sisters were DJing at it for CFCR, a local station here.
Right.
And so I was there, and then as soon as they were done talking, I just went up to them and said, hey, this is really cool. Nice to meet you. I'd love to be a part of this, and just have been a part of it ever since. So I've taught drums at it on a few different occasions. I've taught guitar for probably the first few years, and then taught drums afterwards, because there tend to be more guitar teachers than drum teachers, and luckily I can teach both. And I have sat on the programming committee and the registration committee, volunteer committee. Right now, for the past 4 or 3 years, I've been on the All Grown Up committee, which is basically a same version but for adults, and it's condensed into a weekend. So I went to Iceland about 5 years ago and connected with the Stelparoka people, which is Girls Rock Iceland, and I worked at their adult rock camp, and was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And so basically just took their same schedule and model and applied it right directly into Saskatoon. And so I've been more involved with the All Grown Up camp for the past few years.
What can people expect when they go to a camp like that?
You can expect to have a big impact. A weekend is often, you wouldn't think, enough time to really be transformative, but it's a very empowering weekend. very introspective. There's usually a lot of raw emotion that happens throughout the weekend. People often say afterwards that they didn't realize how desperately in need they were of a weekend like this until it happened. So this is the adult version, of course. Some younger folks have a bit harder, a different experience because your lives are different as an adult. But it's fun. It's so fun. Yeah, and there's always a big concert at the end, which is like one of the best concerts ever. For the Garrys' last album we released a couple of years ago, we coincided our album release show with the concert for the All Grown Up camp. So all the All Grown Up bands actually opened for us, which was like the best opening acts you could ever possibly have. So it was like one of the funnest nights ever.
And that flowed from your experience in Iceland, or it all just kind of merged together?
Yeah, that kind of just merged together. We were thinking, like, how are we going to get the community to come out to this amazing thing? What are some ways we can get people to realize that this is like really cool? So for the first year, because we knew it was really cool, we just had to convince like our friends that it was really cool and like the community around us, and we felt like an album release show would bring some other people too. So we felt like kind of combining those two events together would make this sort of, packed room, and it did. So, that's not always the case. We still play sometimes to 6 people or to a screen virtually now, and things are weird. But for that night, it was sold out and it was amazing.
That's awesome. COVID kind of screwed things up, but what's 2021 going to look like for you, do you think?
Well, we have a few sort of bigger festival shows that we were supposed to play this past year, and we've been sort of deferred to next year, which I think is the case for a lot of bands who play on festival circuits and stuff. But I think there's still a lot to change there. We are tentatively playing some shows that require us to fly, but I don't know how realistic that is. We just have to take it kind of month by month and see how things unfold. But we do have a new album that we recorded in March, just as the world was kind of going into lockdown, or at least just as Saskatchewan was. And so we do have a new album that's much more surfy. The last one we just did, of course, is like a dark, witchy kind of like atmospheric score. So we have this new album that's coming out that's definitely much more of a familiar sound to if you like Garrys music, traditional Garrys music, I guess. So we're going to release that, but we also want to be able to play some shows with it, because that's where the fun really is, right? We love recording, but we also like playing with an audience because there's so much energy that comes out of an audience. So we're probably going to release the album in the springtime and just cross our fingers that we could play some shows at some point in 2021.
Where can people find it? Is that like BandCamp?
Yeah, it will be on BandCamp. It'll be probably out in March or April. We haven't set a date yet because of the nature of things at the moment. Everything's so precarious and up in the air. But yeah, it'll all be on BandCamp. All of our current music is on BandCamp. That's probably the best place to look for any of your favorite artists' stuff, because there's direct links to purchase their music. Of course, we have music on Spotify as well. But if you, if you listen to our album 5 times, we'll probably get 12 cents out of it. Whereas if you're thinking about supporting artists, BandCamp is definitely the best place to do it.
I think my buddy was saying like Fridays, if you go purchase music on Fridays, like artists get the full amount.
Yeah, it's called BandCamp Fridays. It's an initiative that BandCamp started in March, actually, and I believe it's the first Friday of every month. And so BandCamp waives their revenue share on that date. So if you bought an album of your favorite band that day, every piece of that money would go towards the band. And I think BandCamp does take a fee, but it's small comparatively, and it makes it worth it because, like, for us, I can only speak for the projects I'm in, but BandCamp has been well worth the share that they take, because they're basically setting it up for you to sell your music in a way to someone in Japan one day, States the next day, Warman the next day, so you have an international audience in BandCamp. It's really cool.
Someone was telling me that BandCamp is kind of made by people who, they're not in it for the money, they're in it for musicians. And it was kind of like an answer to like Apple.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Another thing that BandCamp has been doing lately that's really cool is abandoning the idea of like top 100 lists or numerical ranking lists of bands or songs, every year. Instead, they're sort of showing like, here's some really great heavy metal stuff that came out, instead of being like, you're number 6 or you're number 12, because it feeds this sort of idea that musicians are constantly being pitted against each other in competition. It's like that vote for me type of mentality, which is like everywhere in the music world, but not necessarily in other medium. So like with photography or filmmaking, you don't see that as much. So yeah, BandCamp there's a lot of really considerate and thoughtful people working there.
I feel like I have like a million more questions for you, but there's just not enough time.
Well, that's okay. It's better than us sitting in silence for like half an hour. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Post-COVID, can we get together and have a pint in person?
That'd be amazing.
Maybe we'll go to Shelter and have some tacos?
That'd be awesome. Or Rebellion. I've never actually been into the tap room there. We were going to play a show there, but it just didn't work out for some reason. So maybe we could do that too.
We have tons of musicians on staff, a couple touring musicians. They're putting out albums all the time. So that's kind of how I found out about you guys. And I know that when we bring live music back, you're probably going to be on the list.
Cool. Well, we will be happy to chat about it in the new year, or, whenever it makes sense to do so.
That's awesome. Lenore, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Rebels. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, be sure to join us on our brand new Facebook group page, the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. I'm going to include links to Lenore Maier's The Garrys, so you can find them on BandCamp, social media, all that fun stuff. I'm also proud to let you know that we're members of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. It's a one-stop shop for tons of locally produced podcasts from across our province. You can find them at saskpodcastnetwork.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Untapped so you don't miss out on the latest in Sask craft beer news. Thank you for joining the Rebellion.